10 o'clock. Good morning, everyone. I am calling the Public Awareness Personnel and Policy Committee to order Monday, June 6th at 10 a.m. in the District Office Boardroom. Do we have any public attendees? And none online. That's correct, right? We are not broadcasting online as well?
Jonathan, you don't see anybody? Just Matthias.
Okay, great. Thanks for joining, everyone. Appreciate you being here. We've got some really exciting things to talk about today. So I've called the meeting to order. Let's start off with personnel, new business.
Yeah, I'll take that, Chair Boyd Hodgson. So the first item on the agenda is the draft telecommuting policy. So just a little background, we did force most of our employees to telecommute in the early stages of COVID, just out of necessity. Not our field people, but our Building A, our administrative folks did. It worked pretty well when we had to do it, but I think the employees got a taste of something that they liked, and they did put in a request to say, is the district interested in considering permanent telecommuting policy? Not that individual employees would telecommute 100% of their time, but they would be able to do some portion of their time telecommuting for the rest of their employment. So we did it for safety reasons, and those no longer apply. I think that during COVID, we did not expect that employees would be as productive. We just knew that it was on kind of last minute notice. We sent people home. It was new. So our expectations of productivity and efficiency and effectiveness and all that were kind of slightly diminished. I think it's fair to say that some groups knocked it out of the park. They did a great job. Like our customer service folks did an awesome job. And that was a good group because it's easier to track their metrics as well, because we could check call volume, time to respond to calls, those types of things. And they did a great job. Not all employees did as well with that. So if we look forward to a permanent or even a pilot telecommuting policy, we're going to pick and choose who can and can't do it based on the type of their job, that person's performance as an employee, and a lot of other factors. So what we're talking about is a pilot program. So we want to see if the committee is interested in considering a pilot telecommuting policy. And if we did it, it would be on a pilot basis, and we would use the results of the pilot program to see if it's something we want to do permanently. And a permanent decision wouldn't be made until we started having discussions about the new memorandum of understanding. So that would become part of the new negotiations, right? So our current MOU expires June 30th of 2023. So we have a little over a year left in our current MOU. So if we developed a pilot telecommuting policy, we'd have about a year to evaluate it, and then that'd be it'd be on the table, so to speak, for the discussions to see if it's a part of our permanent workplace or not. So sometimes telecommuting may be mandatory. We may force people to go home if we had another outbreak. Fortunately, Building B outbreak, and they can't telecommute, they can't work from home anyway. If we had a similar outbreak here, even without the pilot program, we may force employees to go work from home, and I'll call that would be a mandatory telecommuting program. We'd make people go home. They'd work from home, so they'd get paid normally, but they would be forced to. What we're talking about now more is the voluntary program. So the employees are asking, is this something that we can do? So that's what we're here to talk about. I'm not going to go into great detail here. I'm just trying to frame a concept and see what the committee's feel is. Ultimately, we would take the policy to the full board, see if the board's okay with it. And if they are, then we would implement it, and however many months remain between then and when the MOU comes around, we'd get that much experience. We certainly would want to reset expectations. The telecommuting, it's a privilege, and it would be granted only to eligible employees. So Building B probably wouldn't be eligible. Building A, not everybody would necessarily be eligible. It would depend on the type of their job. A lot of criteria that we have, and I'm looking at my notes because we have a draft policy already, and at some point in time I'll make it available to the committee. We'd first of all look at the district's operational needs. Could we accommodate that person in a telecommuting role and make sure that they still get the essential aspects of their job done? We wouldn't, so there'd be two components to it. There'd be a fixed component and a, what do we call it? A fixed and recurring, and then a as-needed basis. So the fixed would be something like, it would be a part of your regular schedule, probably no more than 2 days per week when you're on a 5-day schedule. Let me back up. We're on a 980 schedule, so most employees are. That means they work 5 days 1 week, 4 days the next week. They work 9 days in a 2-week pay period. So on your 5-day week, you can have up to 2 days of telecommuting. On your 4-day week, you'd have only 1 available for telecommuting. We wouldn't allow Mondays and Fridays. We wouldn't allow the day before or after holidays. We're trying to avoid this just becoming long weekends, long holidays, right? It's to accommodate people, and I think the most important thing, it's something I think we need to do. It's a changing workforce out there, right? And to be competitive and to attract and retain the best and the brightest, we have to start looking at alternative work schedules. I think that's just become an expectation of most employees. So, and the intermittent, so that's the regular, it'd be part of your schedule. It wouldn't change from week to week. So for example, employee, maybe of the week that they have 5 days working, Tuesday, Wednesday is their schedule, and maybe the next week it's just Tuesday only. Every pay period, it'd be the same schedule. You can't change it every week, right? So that's the fixed schedule. The intermittent schedule is 4 times per year, once per quarter, an employee can ask to work from home. And this is again, just a draft policy. 4 times per year, they could ask to work from home for like up to a 4-hour period. So for example, if they have to be home for some reason, the, air conditioning, bless you, the air conditioning repair person's coming over, they want to stay there that morning and they want to work from home that morning, we'll allow that as part of the kind of irregular schedule. And again, you get once per quarter, 4 times per year. It would certainly require supervisor or manager approval. That supervisor or manager has to figure out if they think that employee can get the essential functions done working from home. There would be an agreement that an employee would have to sign. The agreement would talk about what their obligations are, what the district's obligations are. We may limit the number of people or rotate schedules from time to time to accommodate the workplace needs. So employee A may start at one schedule, but we're realizing it's not working out because of the other employee schedules, and we may rotate that person or another person's schedule to make sure we have adequate staffing levels, time for people to actually coordinate in person. So there would need to be some flexibility. We may require people to return to the workplace on relatively short notice. We'll give as much notice as possible. But for example, if we're trying it and we just realize this just isn't working, we're going to end it, probably like with a week's notice or something, that person would be required to come back into the workplace then. So from the employee's perspective, if they're telecommuting, we would certainly expect the same standards of performance and professionalism. If they're working from home or the office, kind of the same rules apply. They need to be physically located at their workplace. So what we don't want is somebody to say they're working from home, and every time we call them, they're at Target, right? So the point is you're working from home. You're not just at home and doing what you want to do. You're working from home. They would have to be available throughout the day. So if we call, text, email, our expectation is that there be a pretty quick response. The purpose is not for dependent care. So if you have children, an elderly adult living at your home, staying home to take care of them is not the district's concept of telecommuting, because you're distracted, you're doing other things. If those situations apply, the other accommodations would need to be made. There wouldn't be any change in the work hours or your break schedule. So if you're normally a 7:30 to 5:30 employee, that would probably be your work schedule from home. You'd still be entitled to certain breaks. But again, it's not intended to just take as long as you want for lunch or run out in the middle of the day to go to Home Depot if you want to. If you were going to have unproductive time, if you got sick in the middle of the day and you're working from home, the expectation is you'd still call in and say, hey, I'm sick. I don't think I can perform my function. I'll be unresponsive for the next 2 hours. That would go on your timesheet just like it would if you were at the office and wanted to go home for sick. And obviously you'd have to notify your supervisor immediately. It's difficult for supervisors and managers to do this. First of all, you have to set the expectations, but it's really hard to make sure that the employees are being productive. Maybe there's a false sense of security, but when you're at the office and you walk by somebody's office and you see them looking hard at work, there's a sense that they're being productive. But when they're at home, you have no sense of what they're doing. They could be hard at work, or they may be watching television, you don't know. So the supervisors and managers would be required to come up with metrics that would demonstrate that the employee is being productive at home. And we need to track their work progress. We have certainly some concerns about things like workers' comp. What if somebody gets injured on the job and they're at home? Those are tough. If they're injured at work, it's clear cut. Usually there's witnesses, you can see what caused the injury, the accident. Those things are kind of different when somebody's working from home. We would want some assurance from the employee that they have a proper workplace, which means they're not in the middle of a chaos at home, right? They don't have 4 kids jumping around watching TV, so they have to have a place that's secure. They have to have a proper work setup. They have to have the computer, printer, telecommunications devices, internet access, things like that. Those are really important. Some agencies, a city I used to work for, they would do a home inspection. They would go and make sure that the person had a proper setup. I'm not proposing that we do that, but we would want some assurance from the employee, and it would probably be part of the agreement that they sign that shows that they have a proper workplace setup, and we think that they can be productive and work from home. The intent, what we did during the pandemic is we did provide computer hardware for the employees to take home. So Jonathan was very busy, Jonathan, Patrick, and Matthias, they were all busy outfitting people to go home, not just with the computer, but with multiple screens, maybe a printer if they needed them, those types of things. We would consider that as well. I don't want that to become a huge burden on the district where we're buying twice as many computers as we would normally have, one for them to use at work, one for them to use at home. If they use their own personal computers, that personal computer is not our responsibility to maintain and troubleshoot. It's their personal computer. Again, these are details that will be worked out in the policy itself. And the district wouldn't be responsible for any telecommunication costs. So we're not going to pay for your electrical bill because your lights are on because you're working from home. If you had to come in, if we asked you to come in on what would normally be your telecommuting day, we're not going to pay for your mileage, right? The telecommuting was an accommodation. It was a benefit, and sometimes it may not extend as often as you'd want it to. And clearly there's some IT security precautions. We want to make sure people have virus software and aren't getting hacked, and if they're getting into the network, that we're not opening it up to the entire world out there. So that's kind of the big picture. Like I said, the policy itself is a work in progress. We've looked at the policies of multiple other agencies and trying to pull from them to see what works best for us. Wanted to see if the committee was interested in entertaining it. If we are, it would require board approval, and it would be on a pilot basis leading up to the negotiations that we'll start pretty soon. We'll start those. We have a little over a year to go in this MOU, but it's going to take quite a few months to work out some issues, and I know this will be a big thing to the employees. The employees really want this flexibility. And with that, I'll turn it over to the committee and see if you have any questions, any clarification, or any thoughts about timelines and requirements.
You want to go first?
Sure. No, I have a lot of questions, and I like it. So you answered one of them. I'd love to hear the employee feedback. What do they want? I mean, is it all over the board? Most of them?
It is. I mean, some have asked for full-time. I want to work from home full-time. Some are more like, no, I just want to do it on a case-by-case basis. If I have a sick child, I'd like to be able to work from home. The sick child is probably the sick dependent adult. What's one of the most difficult issues, because if you're staying home to tend to a sick child, we know you're not going to be productive. Because I have 5 kids. I know what it's like when you stay home with a sick kid. You're distracted. You're not 100% productive. So we have to work through issues like that. But that's why we introduced this concept of the flexible component, right? If there's time you have to stay home, if it's a 4-hour stint 4 times a year, I'd be more likely to say, okay, you have a sick kid, you could stay home in the morning, as opposed to, yeah, that's your everyday type of thing. The sick kid is I'll say more the exception, but some have dependent adults living with them that may have significant medical needs. And if you're staying home to take care of them, I know you're not working productively for 9 hours a day.
I mean, so yeah, that's why I do have lots of questions. I like it. I like it a lot. I think, yeah, we should definitely proceed, especially if the employees like it. I like more of a supervisory or a manager kind of overseeing it than the general, because, you know, they know.
Yep.
And I'm okay with all that other stuff, as long, I'm kind of results driven. If you can watch a kid and watch your dad and also get your work done, we don't know, and it's a results driven, so you're right as far as metrics and how you measure metrics. I mean, I don't know, but as long as they're getting the work, so I'm assuming, yeah, like you said, operations off the table, they're here, they're working. So this is mainly admin and customer service?
Yes,
Yeah,
there
it's
may
pretty
be
much-
one or two people over in Building B that are more, they're not field-oriented, they may be more administrative tasks, but they happen to be in Building B. Those types of positions may be eligible, but there's only a couple of those over there.
So what's the total number of employees we're talking about, if we're just talking the ones that want it?
So probably around 50.
Around 50
So
people. So
50,
half.
about 50 are in this building that would be, I'll call eligible. But even some of them, some of the people in this building, we have people the meter service workers that are out in the field most of the time. We have people in inspection that are out inspecting construction jobs. So when you look at the number, that gets whittled down. Your
Okay.
actual, we're probably in the 35 to 40, I'd guess.
So, yeah, I mean, I like it. I mean, some of the ones, so I just wrote down here 1099, some of the ones that just want to totally be at home, I mean, maybe we subcontract them, 1099 them if they want to just stay at home and do it, and if they're doing the work, I mean, because that's like you said, you brought up some interesting points. Work comp at home, you know, you're going to turn in some dog bite, work comp related claims now, and that's how they get, you know, things like that. The cost saving as far as, is there cost savings, is there cost expenses as far as computers at home and all that other stuff? I mean, is there a cost factor to this, or what have you seen?
So there's probably no cost savings to the district. I mean, we're still heating and lighting the building.
See, that's what I was, yeah.
Yeah, so we're not thinking about closing down one whole wing and not having to air condition it or turn the lights on. The building would be open and for whatever employees are
So
here.
there'd be a cost increase possibly.
Well, I think overall there will be. We'll probably have to invest more in IT to help support the number of people that would go back out there. Most of it would be a wash, I would say. My biggest concern is productivity. You know, are we getting the work out of the people that we're paying them?
Right, yeah, and that's only, you can just see by results and metrics, and I don't know how you do that. It would seem to me that's easier to do managerial, you know, you've got supervisor and manager that can check in on them instead of overseeing from a larger, I don't know. That's where you guys are where you're at. But no, I like the idea, and I definitely suggest, yeah, just let's continue to look at it and fine tune it and make happy employees. Happy employees make happy everybody else, so whatever, you know, they want, let's make it work.
Yeah, and thank you. I think that happy employee is important. Part of it, we're gonna be forced into it just to be competitive, and the other part is I want people to be happy. And if they can demonstrate they're being productive and they're happier employees, everyone wins, I think in that.
I agree.
I'm in agreement as well. I think this is a great idea, and it sounds to me like you've really thought it through, all the contingencies and the parameters, and I like the idea of running a pilot to see, you know, how it goes. And what I would want to make sure is that, let's say you run a pilot and there's a certain group of folks that you say, you know, can work from home, but for those particular people, it's not a good fit. I wouldn't want that to necessarily exclude that department from ever being able to try it again. So I would want to make sure of that. I do have some questions. You mentioned that, you know, the managers would be responsible for setting the expectations. Have you spoken with the senior leaders, and they're okay with that? They're okay with managing that, because that's a big job, and it's personal, right? Because they know all the people that work for them, and they're going to be. It's adding another layer of monitoring. You know, I know they already have to evaluate their folks, but are they okay with it?
Yeah, so we've had multiple conversations with the managers. Early on during COVID, it was a necessity, so we were just talking about how do we manage this thing that we have to do. And as we start transitioning to more of an optional, to a choice point as we go forward, we've had some conversations with the managers. We need to have more. So, before we develop the policy and implement it, we would have more conversations with the managers. The managers would probably have conversations with their supervisors to make sure this is something that they can work with. One of the things I should have pointed out is, in the line of trying to make for happier employees, we already are in the middle of a pilot program for flexible work schedules, right? So people were saying that they wanted more flexibility in the workplace. So I think it was I want to say January, we implemented a flexible work schedule, and we worked with the supervisors and the managers, but it really came from the employees. I reached out to all the employee groups and said, is there a particular work schedule you'd like to work, knowing that you still have to work 80 hours over a 2-week period? Some people said it's hard for me to get in real early. I'd rather start later and work later. Some say, no, I'd rather start earlier and get out earlier. So we accommodated a lot of people. We have probably a dozen different work schedules right now that were different from what the person's traditional work schedule was. Some it's a whole group. For example, our construction group, they went from a 980 work schedule to a 410 schedule. So they don't work any Fridays now. They're working 10-hour days, 4 days a week. So we're evaluating that to see, are they still productive in a whole range of other work schedules. So we have some experience and some practice in having flexibility in the workplace, and I think it's worked pretty well. And I think that'll help us implement a telecommuting policy even better. But yeah, I think the supervisors and managers are critical in this. I don't know what people do on a day-to-day basis well enough to know if they're being productive. So we would rely on the supervisors and managers.
Okay. Regarding your senior leadership team, are you planning on rotating those folks' schedules so that, you know, I presume this will apply to them too if they would like, or if they're eligible, but making sure that all of them don't take the same day off so that there's coverage.
The managers are certainly treated differently. They have a lot more flexibility in their schedule just inherently, right? They're not eligible for overtime. They're exempt from a lot of certain rules. Coverage is an important thing. I wouldn't want all the managers to be out. When we look at our 980 schedules, all the managers are on a 980 schedule, but we make sure we have adequate coverage on both Fridays. So those are important things, and as we continue the discussions with the managers and the supervisors, we talk about those issues.
Okay, thank you. A couple of other questions. I would like to see what the cost breakdown would be. I think it's really important that we have, if folks are going to do this, that they have what they need to be productive, that we set them up for success. I am really hesitant to have someone using their personal computer because, you know, as Director Pinnock and I have, you know, we've attended a couple of conferences now and we've talked about cybersecurity. I would not want folks using their personal equipment. It just opens us up to exposure that I don't think we want, and there could be liability issues there too. So that I would request that we take a look at that and make sure that folks have the ability to perform their job functions using Vallecitos equipment, and that they have everything that they need, and you know, yes, that they have an adequate setup. You know, that doesn't have to be a dedicated office, but it has to at least be a space where they can work, you know. So I would highly prefer that they have the equipment they need and not use their personal computers, because I don't want the district to be exposed to that.
If I can, on that point, maybe look at Jonathan real quickly. And during the height of the pandemic, how many extra computers did we have to purchase to outfit people so that they could work from home?
Not many. We had a lot of kind of training laptops that we kind of repurposed. A lot of people currently have laptops anyway that were able to work from home. And because of the pandemic, we've kind of transitioned more into, if you're a possibility for working at home, if we're gonna replace your computer, we're probably gonna buy you a laptop, at least for the foreseeable future. And then, you know, if things kind of tone back down, we'll go back to purchasing desktops, because they are less expensive. But we want people to be able to go in a hurry. It's much easier to just unplug and leave than it is for us, and really myself and Patrick, to kind of put together 15, 20 computers real fast for everybody, and find them and update them and make sure we got power supplies and monitors and everything. So it's almost easier to go, okay, we're ready to go when and if we need to go.
Yeah, thanks,
Okay,
Jonathan.
thank you.
So the idea of a laptop sounds simple. It's very portable. You pick it up, you go home, and you have it. But most people have multiple screens. They need a docking station to connect, and they may have a stand-up workstation at work. So there's all these, you know, peripherals that the people may need. So to your point with cost estimates, cost breakdown, we'd have to look at that and say, what would it take to properly outfit? And I don't even know what properly means, but we can talk with the IT. What does it cost to properly outfit people to work from home?
And finally, I would like to see kind of a breakdown by department and pay grades of who would be eligible. You know, I think this is a tremendous benefit, and what I you know, where I'm going with this is sort of approaching it from an equity perspective, because, you know, we do know that women typically do most of the caregiving in families. We don't want it to disproportionately not make women eligible to do this. So I would like that analysis so we can see, what are the breakdown of, the departments, what are the demographics of that department, what's the pay grade? Because this is such a tremendous benefit. And I think, COVID did teach us that there are different ways that we can work. And I think it's wonderful that you're looking at this and you're gonna offer it. And I think a pilot study is fair to look at it and see, can this be done from home? Can certain departments do it? Can certain employees do it? I think absolutely that's fair. So I'm very supportive of this. I think it's great.
All right, awesome. So would the committee be interested in hearing this again, or I could just take this feedback and the next stop for me was going to be the board? But if the committee wanted to see it again to answer some of these questions and maybe look at the draft policy, I'll look to the both of you. Otherwise, I was going to take it to the board next.
I'm okay with it going to the board.
Okay.
As long as these issues that we've raised are addressed,
Yeah.
And we can talk about that in the meeting. I think
Yeah.
that's great.
So I will say, from just a processing perspective, it may be a little bit difficult to address the last item you brought up, which is kind of the breakdown by who's eligible, who's not. Because what I envision is we'd go to the board to adopt the policy, and then our next step would be to implement, which would mean having the managers and supervisors identify those people in their workforce that they think are eligible and could be productive. So it would kind of be more it would almost be after the policy gets implemented that we'd make that determination. So my guess is that we'd err on the side of being, I hate to say overly generous, but err on the side of trusting, right? And then if people aren't productive and aren't meeting the quotas or whatever we put forth, then they may get the privilege revoked. Unless it's clear, if we know, hey, this person can't get that job done at home, and the most extreme example is of our field people, but even here, there may be people on this side it's really hard to do. I would never do it myself. I'd much rather come into the office and work. But, and I think there's certain other people that would be very difficult for them to get their job done remotely. But as the process, assuming the board approves it, as the process unfolds, then we'll have a better determination. And what we could do is after the board approves, assuming the board does approve the policy, as it gets implemented, I could report out to the board and say, hey, here's the breakdown of the 40 people or whatever that were eligible, here's how many are actually on it, and here's generally their schedule. I won't get to the level of detail by individual names, but we can say X% of the people are doing it, and here's, of the people that aren't, here's the main reasons why they're not. So. And I heard what you said, Director Boyd Hodgson. Just because we say no initially doesn't mean it's no forever. If we said no initially because there was a barrier and they found a way to overcome that barrier, they'd be eligible for reconsideration down the road.
I think that's really important, just because it is such a tremendous benefit.
Yeah.
And, people might be in different life stages where they are not able to do this right now, but we know that we retain employees a long time, and that's a testament to how great it is to work here.
Yeah.
So maybe they can revisit it, and we can have that built into the resolution or the ordinance, so that there is a timetable that if it's not working right now, then they can reapply and
Yeah.
or ask again in 6 months or a year or something like that.
Right. Okay, good. All right, so next stop will be the board.
I'm okay with that. Mhm.
Sounds good. Good deal.
I mean, that's the whole purpose of a pilot program, right? You implement it and then tweak it as you see
Right.
fit, so, yeah, go forward.
Okay, so I think we're ready to move on to the next one. Did you get everything you needed from us
I
on that?
did,
Okay,
yeah.
great. Employees Association request.
Yeah, so I was approached by the Employees Association, and there's two people. One person represents Building B, one represents Building A, and they came to me and they asked for consideration of lifting the cost of living allowance cap due to the high inflation numbers. So you probably all have heard inflation's running at about 8%, right? So that kind of triggered this request. So our memorandum of understanding with our employees places limits on the COLA every year.
So sorry, before you go on, just Employees Association, is this just in-house association?
It's just
They're
in-house,
just
not-
representative?
Yeah, it's
No?
not a union, we're not part of anything.
This is just all, somebody that represents employees in each building?
Correct, yeah.
Within okay.
So the current MOU, which expires June 30th of next year, it places limits on the COLA. It says it can never be negative, so we'll never take money away from people, but it doesn't go above 3%. There's a countywide index that we look at. So we give the cost of living that meets that index, unless it goes over 3%, then we cap it at 3%. But if it went over 3%, any amount that's over could roll over into the next year. I'll give you an example. Let's say cost of living for San Diego County is 4.5%. In the next year coming up, we'd limit it to 3%, but that extra 1.5% could be added to the next year. Let's say the following year is only a 1% COLA region-wide. We could add that 1.5% to the 1% in the following year. So it's just a carryover provision. So the COLA is normally effective in July. It's the first full pay period in July, so it's not like July 1, but it's roughly the beginning of July is when the COLA gets implemented. So the Employees Association basically said, hey, a 3% increase in July isn't going to help us keep up with inflation. So that was the genesis of the request. They didn't specify a specific amount. So they didn't say, hey, let it go up to 8%. They just said 3% isn't enough. So we had a nice conversation about that, and I'll share a little bit about thoughts. But just to remember that the MOU is a collection of a lot of things. One thing is the COLA, but there's a whole lot of things. And it's not normal that we would pull one thing out of this MOU basket to negotiate with. Normally, if somebody wants to open up the MOU, let's open up the MOU. This request is very specific, and I'd say it's almost unprecedented. It was a huge inflationary increase that I don't think people saw coming, at least to that extent. So I understand the impacts that the high inflationary costs are having on people, groceries, gas, and unfortunately our lowest wage employees are the ones that have to buy housing further away, that drive the most, that get hit the most, right? So I get it. And I'm not here to advocate for or push against it. I'm just passing along the request from the Employees Association. So maybe throw out a few options for consideration. One is deny the request. We have an MOU that runs through the end of June of 2023, and we'll reconsider different caps potentially when we negotiate the next MOU. So that's one option. Another option would be to kind of accede to their request and grant a COLA that's above 3%. It could be a one-time thing. It doesn't mean that every year we're going to be granting above the upper limit. The amount would to be determined. I'll say the problem I see with that is it provides an ongoing benefit. It actually raises people's salary. So if, let's say, we gave them a full 8%, they would get an 8% increase, and then next year any increase would be above that higher starting point. So they would realize a permanent benefit for what may be a relatively short period impact due to COVID in the high inflation. We could consider offsetting reductions in future years with this concept. And I'll give you an example. Let's say they said, hey, let's say we agreed to give them a 5% increase in July. That's 2 percentage increase points above the maximum, right? So what we could do is over the next 2 years, we could take the COLA minus 1% and then COLA minus 1%. So after a 2-year period, we'd kind of be back to where we would have otherwise been. So there's not an ongoing long-term benefit, but it provided short-term relief to the employees during this time. Now those employees that may retire in that period of time, they'll never see the downside, right? They'll never see the minus 1%. They'll see the 5% increase. They may work here for a year and we may see a huge retirement. People may say, oh, I'm just going to retire. I got a 5% bump. It's time to retire, if they're in that retirement eligibility age. But the biggest point is, I don't think the employee should see a long-term benefit for these short-term things unless it's part of a broader negotiation package. And that's what usually we do during the MOU negotiations. We look at a lot of factors. So I'm a little uncomfortable with looking at only one factor. So that's the second option, is to consider a permanent or temporary increase in the COLA cap. And the last one would be maybe to consider a one-time non-PERSable bonus. So remember a while ago we had the Aqua JPIA check, and the board decided, the board agreed to give $500 to every employee, kind of just an overall sharing. And the board also said, we'll give $500 to each employee that receives a COVID booster shot. So there was 2 packages to that, right? Those are both one-time non-PERSable. It means you did get money, but it's not going to be added to your salary for the calculation of PERS retirement purposes. If the board wanted to provide a one-time cost increase, I would suggest that we limit it to money that was either intended to be given to employees in the first place and wasn't spent, or it was a result of the efforts of the employees. I'll give you two examples. So one is the Aqua JPIA check I mentioned. So it was $126,000. The board agreed to $500 for each employee, certain employees. That was about $50,000. So now we got about $76,000 left in that account, right? The board also said $500 per employee that went ahead and got their booster shot. I think right now we have maybe 40 to 50 people that have done it. So that may be another $25,000 to $30,000. So there may be, at the high end, maybe $50,000 left in that pot of money that we got from Aqua JPIA. And remember, that money we got from Aqua JPIA was only because of the great efforts of our staff. We wouldn't have gotten that if staff hadn't worked so safely. And in the other pocket of funds is we have an employee match in our deferred compensation. So it's called a 457B program. If employees contribute at least $2,000, we'll match $2,000 for each employee. So from a budgeting perspective, we assume all 108 employees are going to do it. So at $2,000, we budgeted $216,000. Our projection for this year is that we're only actually going to match $165,000. Some people just don't participate in it for whatever reason. So there's about another $50,000 there. So we're close to about $100,000 that was either intended to be paid to employees through the 457, or it was the results of the efforts of the employees. So if the board were to consider this third option, or the committee were to consider this third option, I would suggest that we limit it to that amount of money. And then how we spread that, we can figure it out. I certainly wouldn't be eligible. I would suggest that the managers wouldn't be eligible. We'd figure out if all supervisors are eligible. But just for talking purposes, let's assume about 100 employees are eligible, $100,000, 100 employees, each employee would get about $1,000. That amount would probably be taxable, so they'd have to pay a tax burden on it. But the other money they could use, put groceries on the table, put gas in the tank, those types of things. So I just wanted to present those, talk about the request made by the Employees Association and present what I see are three viable options on how to respond to that. So with that, I'll turn it over to the committee.
I think it's a really interesting request, and we know that a lot of people are suffering, and we know that the folks who have lower incomes are suffering disproportionately, like you mentioned. I hear all of the perspectives, and I hear the ones that you've shared, and I can appreciate not wanting for this to be a permanent benefit. I think you mentioned that there was the option of increasing it, but then reducing it over time. And yes, you're right, some folks would retire and may not get those benefits, but some people will also be hired and also not get the benefit. I think it's, I think that's the option that I'm leaning toward, because it demonstrates good faith. It demonstrates that we are trying to help the folks that work here, and it's non-permanent. So I think that's the option that I'm leaning toward.
Can you maybe,
Yeah.
I'm seeing a quizzical look over there, and I'm sharing the same one. So you mentioned both, and you said that's the one. So the latter, actually increasing
Increasing
the
it,
COLA.
and maybe not increasing it to 8%, but, figuring out a reasonable amount and then reducing it. What I'm not clear on is, you mentioned that you could roll it over, but if we're locked, if Vallecitos is locked into an MOU for X number of years, then that does not get revisited to roll over until the expiration of that MOU, or is it year by year that you revisit it?
So year by year, so the current MOU, forget about the Employees Association request.
Okay.
Our current MOU allows this carryover. If the actual inflation rate is above 3%, or the actual cost of living allowance is over 3%, it carries forward to the next calendar year.
Automatically,
Yeah, automatically, unless the next year is also over 3%. So if you had a period of years of above 3% COLAs, they may never catch up, and then the MOU may expire, and they never see the benefit of that. So it
Okay.
doesn't carry over to the next MOU, it carries over from year to year within the term of the MOU. Now, the successive MOU could say, we want to look back and we want to get credit for all those carryovers, but that would be part of the negotiations for the next one. But in the current one, it only lasts through the 5-year term. Was it 5-year, Bridget? The current 4 right now. 4. the current four-year term of the current MOU, it wouldn't allow us to add, I don't believe it would allow us to add it to the next MOU. It would have to be part of the negotiations for the next one.
So just so I'm clear, I'm going to draw it because I need a visual. So let's say in 2020, inflation was 5%, in 2021, and you could possibly carry over the 2% to
Right.
2021.
Yep.
But if it, in 2022, if it was 8%, you wouldn't then carry the 2% over to the 2022. You would actually not carry anything over because the 8% is greater than the 3% even yet again.
Yep.
So it's possible that we've gone several years without the rollover because inflation has been rising for a couple of years, hypothetically.
Well,
I don't
actually,
actually know if it has,
Yeah,
but
Faster
I
than
think this is the
3%.
first year since I've been here that inflation has actually exceeded the 3%. So I
Okay.
haven't seen it proven, but I'll.
it's never rolled over then, that's what you're
Yeah,
saying?
but it hasn't in, I don't believe it has in my tenure, but it has in, I believe it has in the past, and maybe somebody who's been here longer can explain. Bridget, do you know how it's happened in the past?
Yeah, that is how it happened.
Okay.
I think the last time we had it happen was 5 or 6 years ago. It's been quite a while before we've even hit the max.
And then it would require negotiation on the back end to rebalance or to readjust?
Yeah, let's say you get to that last year of the current MOU and you've got 3 or 4 percentage points at risk. Per the current MOU, sorry, you've run out of time. But the next MOU, you could say, hey, we want to not have that extra, the surplus disappear. We want it to be able to be rolled in. That's a negotiation point for the next MOU, not to be resolved within the context of this MOU.
Gotcha, and that doesn't provide any immediate relief, which is the
It doesn't.
impetus for the ask, right? I think there wouldn't have been an ask if folks weren't
Yeah, and
needing.
you're exactly
immediate
right, and
relief.
I should have stressed that. That's what I took away from the meeting with the two association reps, is that there's an immediacy to the need, right? It's not, we want a little bit of money in our check over the next 3 years, we need money now. So, and I know it's been a couple of months, we were supposed to have talked about this at the last policy committee meeting, but we canceled it, so this is the earliest I could get it here. But it's not like inflation went away, right? And gas
Right.
prices are still sky
That's
high,
right.
food prices keep going up. So I think the urgency is still there. But it's, I wouldn't say it's unprecedented, but this is a rarity that you'd come back, that somebody would come back and say, hey, we want to renegotiate right in the middle of the MOU.
I think that we are living in unprecedented times, and I appreciate the sense of urgency. I think raising, raising the cap temporarily now to provide benefit to employees now, and then when the MOU is up for negotiation next year, revisiting that. Am I understanding that correctly, that is an option? I guess what I'm trying to affect is getting money into people's pockets. They need it. So that's what I favor.
Yeah, I would say
Well-
the best way to do that would be the third option, where it's just a one-time, we're gonna write you a check, it could be in the next payroll type of thing, depending on when the board approves it, and they would get it one time, but there'd be no ongoing impacts. That was it. If inflation continued next year and they wanted to make another request, we would consider that as another one-time request at some point in the future.
That's kind of where I'm at as well. I mean, because I don't want to go on the COLA roller coaster, because we could adjust it based on inflation, deflation, recession, and all of a sudden we're on a COLA roller coaster. I mean, I say utilize the Aqua JPIA money to the best of our ability each year, depending on refunds, hopefully, if we have good, claims history. And that money always go back to the employees in a bonus form, because I think it would satisfy the urgency. Yes, if we have the money now, let's put it in their checks now, right? I mean, that's money in our pockets that we already have.
Right.
So I'm for that third option as well, just using that Aqua JPI money, refund it to the best of your, you know how to do it best, and those that are struggling, and not get on this recession, because it could be a roller coaster every year. We could be adjusting COLA every year based on, hey, we've got a deflation now, we've got a recession, we've got an inflation. I don't like roller coasters. I get scared. I don't put my hands up and go, "We." I just, I hate this. So I'm not ready for that. That's just too many ups and downs. And when we're making it permanent, well, we'll make it permanent for a year. Well, then we can readjust. To me, that seems not where I want to go, at least personally. I like using JPIA money. We've got it in refund form, and let's use it to the best of your knowledge.
I suggested we call it a cola coaster, so that we.
Cola coaster, I
so we
like
can
that.
Put those two words
Yeah,
together.
the cola coaster. I'm not a cola coaster.
I would be a little, the second option's a little difficult, because in some years, we may say, well, we're gonna carry forward 2+2, but then we're gonna take away 1 for this one, it gets complicated, right? It's not high-level math, but it's just a lot of things to carry forward. And when you have limited terms of COLAs, trying to figure out, does it expire here, do you have to negotiate it next year? If you're looking to me for my recommendation, if the board wants to consider doing anything, I would suggest we make it a one-time, get the money into their pockets as soon as possible, trust that they'll manage it to the extent possible, the best that they can, and then anything we need to do to correct the long-term impacts of inflation should be the subject of the negotiations for the next MOU.
Next year.
Yes,
Next year.
it'll probably start within the next couple of months. We'll start low levels, but then it'll heat up, and then before June 30th of next year, we'll be coming forward to the board for approval of a new MOU.
Tell me again how many times inflation has exceeded 3% in recent memory?
Yeah, I don't know. I wish Mike Arthur was here. He'd probably be able to tell you. But,
I would say probably 0 in the last 5.
Okay.
James, did you have something?
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing. It hasn't exceeded, at least in the last few MOUs. It did exceed back pre-recession during the boom, but we didn't have a carryover. We didn't have a rollover, and that's one of the reasons they put the rollover in, and it's been in the last couple MOUs. But it hasn't exceeded it since we've had a rollover until now.
Okay, so the rollover has never been exercised.
Yeah.
And if I may, the part of the MOU negotiations for next year is.
Bridget, can you come sit up here by the microphone? Thank you.
Is this on?
No. There it goes.
So part of negotiations for next year is a class and compensation study. So in theory, all the employees and the salary schedule will be adjusted to market based on the MOU, which I think is 103% of average from what we find. So in theory, the cost of living will be adjusted already based on the next class and comp.
Okay. And when you,
That's like a one-time adjustment, right? We
Right.
adjust the schedules, the salaries, so now there's a new starting point, but then going forward from there, then you'll have COLAs on top of that in subsequent years.
okay, I've never heard of a cost of living being so low at 3%. Cost of living is usually 4, 4.5, or 5 that I've been experiencing, that I've experienced in the private sector. So I feel like it's low. I feel like 3% is a low cap.
Yeah, and again, that's a negotiation, right? Anytime two parties come together, the employees may have been looking for 5%, and maybe the district was lower, and they agreed with the whole basket of goods at 3%. Now, again, we don't make up the index. When we actually go to apply it, there's a CPI for all, I think it's the San Diego County CPI. It's figured out by somebody else, and we tie it to that. And that's what we compare to 3%. If it's above 3%, then we cap it at 3 and carry over. If it's less than 3, it's whatever the San Diego CPI is.
Did we just approve the budget based on that?
Yeah, so we put it in so the budget that you approved was looking at the current expected increases based on where we see inflation going, and it factored in a 3%. So Wes assumed that we're gonna max out per the current MOU, 3% salary increases for next year, or starting in July.
Right,
So that's what the budget was based on.
right.
And tell me again approximately how much money we have in JPIA money that would be distributed.
So I think we have somewhere between, so we don't know right now, because when the board said we'll pay $500 of incentive for anybody who gets boosted, we gave them until, I think, October 30th.
For 31st.
So we won't know until the end of October, but my guess is that if people haven't done it by now, they're probably not gonna do it. and Bridget's working on the numbers, but I think we're probably in the maybe 50 people, 40 to 50.
Yeah.
And at 500 each, that's maybe 20 to 25,000 we paid out. We already paid 50 out with the one time, everybody got that 500. So that's about a total of 75, and there was 126,000 in there, so it's right around 50,000 in, I'll call it surplus Aqua JPIA. So there's 50,000 in that, about 50,000 in deferred comp. So between the two, there's $100,000 that wouldn't be digging into any other funds. It's not monies that we had planned on realizing or benefiting from in the future. We thought we'd spend all the 457. We didn't ever plan on getting the Aqua JPIA, so it was, I hate to say found money. It was through the results of hard work by our employees, but money we didn't plan on. So that's why as general manager, I felt comfortable coming to the board saying we should share these Aqua JPIA proceeds with the employees. 'Cause this year we didn't give it all back to the employees. Some got put back into the reserves, but it's still there. We could pull it back out. Now, you may find some of the other board members say, hey, we intentionally didn't give it all back. We wanted the ratepayers to benefit from that being in reserves. So there may be some pushback to pulling it out, but that's their argument to make, right? So I just wanted to run this concept by the committee, see if there's any energy at all to take it forward to the board, and then we'll have another version of this conversation at the board.
So let's say we do take it forward to the board, and there's divided opinion about pulling the money back out. Then raising the cap would get around that. Temporarily raising the cap would get around that.
It's another way to address the issues raised by the employees. But it's more complicated on the long-term consequences of it.
Sure, it doesn't have to be though, right? I mean, it doesn't have to be a permanent implementation.
Right.
And I think that's something that we can address at that time.
Yeah.
I'm okay taking it to the board. I'd like to see what happens.
Yeah.
Because
So,
I think that we, I think Director Pennock and I both want to give money to the employees. They're asking, they're suffering, and I think we're aligned in that, right? It's just the devil's in the details and the logistics of how it's dispensed. So it's, it does make sense to me that if we have the money already, and it sounds like it's least complicated to give the one time, the employees will have to pay tax on it. So in reality, it'll be, if each one gets $1,000, it'll be less than that, 1,000 roughly. That can help a little bit. So sure, let's take it to the board and see what happens.
okay, what I'll probably do, we'll put it on for the board's consideration. It may be a while, I'm on vacation for the next 2 meetings. When we come back, we'll put it on the agenda. I'll probably present all 3 options to the board, just as you receive 3 options, and you can voice your opinions about which one you support, and that's fine, but I don't want the board to think we didn't consider other options.
And let's say if, when it comes back to the board and we resolve it in that meeting, how quickly could money be in the pockets of the people?
Pretty quickly, it'd probably be the following pay period. Yeah, finance can usually do that pretty quickly. They're just usually waiting on direction from the board. If we went to some complicated formula where lower wage people got a bigger share than higher wage eligible employees, that may take a little bit more time. I just gave easy math, right, which is
Sure.
assuming everybody got the same. But if the committee or the board wanted to say, hey, lower wage people should make more than the higher wage people, we could do that too. And that may take a little bit of time to figure out a formula and apply that, but finance can do it pretty quickly to get it in the paychecks.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we'll plan on taking it forward to the board. If you're okay, I can say in the staff report that the committee recommended the one time.
I think that you can say that
Or I can be silent on it.
I would appreciate you presenting all of the options neutrally.
Okay,
Because I would like to think a little bit more about this.
Okay.
I think the end result is that we want folks to have money in their pockets as soon as
yeah.
possible.
So here's what I'll say in the staff report. I'll say these three options were presented to the committee, and the committee was supportive of bringing this item forward to the board for consideration.
Sure, I think that's great. And I think also having it laid out rather than just spoken verbally will
Yep.
be helpful.
Yeah, and we'll have some examples maybe on the board with like your chart. We
Yeah.
can do something like that to show
Hope
people.
it's better than mine, actually. Yeah.
We can show people the longer term consequences of the options they may choose.
I didn't see the chart. Was it a roller coaster?
No.
Oh, it was a cola coaster. It's a
cola coaster.
Oh, okay.
Follow the bouncing ball.
Gotcha.
And I think that's it. I've got
Okay.
what I need on that one.
Great, well, good. I'm glad that they, I'm glad they asked for what they needed, and I'm glad we're discussing it.
Yep. All right, thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Okay, next, the public awareness, old business, Vallecitos Water District scholarships.
Yeah, and Chris is going to lead that conversation. I think you should have a packet on your table of all
do.
the.
Thank
you, Bridget.
The packets.
Thank you.
So, good morning, board members. This is your packet with our scholarships. Pretty pleased with the results. We got 13 applications. We got from various places, students at Palomar, San Diego State, San Marcos High School, Cal State San Marcos, and Mission Hills High School. A little disappointed, didn't receive anything from High Tech High, didn't receive anything from the alternative school, Twin Oaks, but we did get 13 applications, and happy to get the 13. I provided a matrix to provide some additional information for your background work on where they're enrolled at, where they plan to attend, were they pursuing water studies, did they complete the application, the letter of recommendation, the essay, and the financial needs assessment, and pretty much all those were yeses, except for one person didn't get a letter of recommendation within their packet, and that's shown on your worksheet there.
And the letter of recommendation, was it recommended or was it required?
It
I
was
can't
one of the
remember.
items that they were supposed to
Okay,
provide.
gotcha. Okay.
I think Director Pennock had screened his down to 6 applicants, and we can further discuss.
I think it's important, I think it's important to have standardized criteria, which I know that we have not discussed, but I think that now is the time to do that, and we are getting sort of short on time. When did we want to target rolling out these scholarships?
So it was hopeful that we would get them to them before the fall semester.
Sure.
And the timing, we will have to get W-9 forms from the students, I expect, knowing our financial systems here. So there's a process to get that done, and I believe we would also want to take this item to the board of directors to get the full board's approval to provide whatever scholarship recommendations the committee makes.
Okay. I really appreciate you printing this out and providing the matrix. Because we did not get any from High Tech High or Twin Oaks Foothills, can we take the liberty of awarding those 2 scholarships to applicants? Or is it written such that, that money just stays within the district?
I think we expected to offer 6 scholarships, and so based on what we received, I think it would be okay for the committee to recommend to the board additional scholarships to additional students so that we have a maximum of 6.
I like that.
Yeah,
I appreciate that.
I think our hope was to spread the money as broadly as possible, but if there's a couple of schools that didn't respond, I'd still like to maybe kind of spread the love over the other schools that did have some kind of interest.
I'm
But yeah, I
okay with
agree
that.
with Chris. The intent was, let's give out 6 scholarships.
Okay. Maybe you'd like to talk about the criteria that you used?
I just not common sense, but just going through and looking at letters of recommendation, and I just went through, read the applications, read the letters of recommendation, read their cost analysis, and just kind of narrowed it down. I forget, to be honest, I think I emailed it to you. Huh?
I highlighted them if you'd like me to.
Yeah, which ones?
Give you a
Because that's all I
listing.
did. I just went through, there was nothing just except dividing it up evenly.
I
as
don't
best
want you to tell me what his top ones were. I don't want you to tell me. I don't want to be biased
Okay.
about that.
So that's all I did, is I got through the emails, I just went through and said, yeah, these are my top 6.
Okay.
Nothing, no huge.
Okay. And I think it's also important that we probably not say the names publicly. I think that seems like we should not, in our discussions of these applications, because that just seems like that's unprofessional. I don't know.
That's an interesting point. We didn't even talk about that, whether there's some confidentiality in this, so.
Right, I mean, I know that if I, if I applied for one of these and I heard my name in a public setting, it might set up expectations.
Sure.
Right? So maybe, I think, maybe we don't talk about names as we're discussing this. But I think, yes, first of all, meeting all of the requirements for submission. I think that's pretty standard. Following the directions is something that I would be interested in. Number two, it looks like they all demonstrate financial need, and I would be inclined to specify that there is a financial need that is there before we choose. I am more inclined to choose folks that are in the community, that are local, but I don't know if that is necessarily a requirement. Is that something that you thought about as well?
Thought about it, but not a requirement, same, exactly. I mean,
okay.
it did play a part into it.
Okay.
I mean, I did. Water studies actually played a part into it as well. Those I want to pursue.
I'm inclined to provide preference for folks that are going into water and wastewater, water/wastewater. But, I know that we opened up the application process to, environmental studies, for example, as well, because, that's important. And I'm thrilled that we got 13 applications. I was really afraid that we were going to get like 2. So I'm thrilled. I think, we cast a wide net so that we would have choice. Okay, are there any specific criteria, because this has to be defensible, right? Because, somebody might be upset that they don't get the application. So I think what we should do is maybe put together a list of criteria and publish that with the results showing how we arrived. Whether or not this is the criteria for subsequent years, I think that that's a point of negotiation. This was our first time doing this, and it's a learning process as well. But we also have to appreciate that we are, we're making a difference in people's lives, and not everybody is going to win. So how about that for moving forward? I'm not sure that we're ready to announce the winners or at this meeting.
Yeah, so I don't know how Director Pennock did his work, but I bet he didn't apply a rigorous point system to each of these criteria. When we evaluate things like professional engineers, when they submit something, we may say, hey, here's the 4 categories we're going to score you on, and here's the rating we'll give each. This is worth 25%, this is worth 50. And then we score each of them in those categories, and we multiply their score times the percent criteria, right? And you end up with this ultimate score. I don't think that was ever the intent here. I think the criteria were more to help the two of you figure out who do you want to pick. And then my thought it was be more of a subjective experience. So when you read through it, you say, oh, this one really resonated with me. I think this person demonstrated they have a bigger financial need, or they're more committed to it, water studies, but without giving them a score. You say, oh, he got an 8 and he got a 7. So what I heard from what you said is that there may be a little bit more rigor in there, that we didn't go into this thinking it would be that. I like what you said about Director Boyd Hodgson about you have to meet all the boxes. So of the 13, 1 didn't make it. So now we're down to 12. How you would choose to apportion or select from that remaining 12, I think would be up to the two of you without being overly rigorous, but happy to do whatever the committee wants.
Because I know that we're going to be asked by the other board members how we chose. That's something that there is a demonstrated keen interest.
I mean, how I did show it, I just read through the applications, read through the night. Yeah, there was an affinity towards those 6. I mean, some were just, it was based on need, based on even, the letters of recommendation are important to me, actually. And then some of them did their cost analysis. So I was able to just work down from 11, down to 7, down to, okay, here's my top 6. And again, it wasn't a big deal. I mean, we can talk about, I don't have a problem, I don't think, I don't know how many are listening, but none. But we can discuss them. You don't want to see my list.
I don't want to see your list.
We've got to make a decision pretty soon, right?
We do. We don't have to decide right now. And I think what I would like to do is, now that I know it's okay, if we just sort of read them and come up with the winners, because I was imagining that we would have like some kind of rubric or score card, because that's what was requested of us by other board members. And I don't want to go back to them and say, oh, we just sort of, we winged it. You know, I don't think that that's appropriate. So I think that maybe we come together and we share our six. One of your six was not.
We come together? We come
Yes,
together?
yes, we come together, because we can do that and not violate the Brown Act, and sort of drill down into our decision-making process. I don't think that that needs to play out in the open. I don't think that that would be professional.
Yeah,
So
I agree.
we come together and we, you know, because we might agree on most of them, and then we can arm wrestle over the next ones.
I would lose that arm wrestle, but we could try.
How does that sit with staff? Is that?
Yeah, that's fine. And I assume you're talking offline, the two of you would meet offline prior to the next policy committee, and with the intent that at the next policy committee meeting, you'd have a recommendation.
We could bring forward our recommendation. That's how you
Yep.
envisioned this working, correct?
Yes, and the recommendation would be just that. That recommendation would go to the board, right?
And then
the
we
board would make
can,
the final
we
assumption.
can prepare our, you know, our reasoning for the six that we move forward with. And I guess we have to decide if the remainder of the board has all of the applicants and they do their own research, or if, you know, if that's on us. And because I think when we started talking about this, it was with the understanding that you and I would be the evaluators.
Yeah, we will make the full packet available to all the board members, but I think they're looking to the two of you
Okay.
to decide this.
So it'll contain all of the application and that will be a publicly available document?
Yeah, it'll be, when it goes to the board, it'll probably be part of the packet, the board packet. I don't think there's any expectation of privacy when you submit a request for funding.
Okay, that's what I'm concerned about.
could check
I mean,
with the
because
attorneys on
these are presumably their children, so,
Yeah, they could be minors, yeah.
yeah. Okay, yeah, can we just get a legal opinion about that? You know, and there might be something that some of these folks say, you know, about their story or something that they don't want public,
Yeah.
so.
And I don't know if the board wants to know all the applicants. They just want to know, hey, who do you give
Yeah,
these to?
they may not.
Who'd
They
you give
may
them to
not.
and why? Not, I mean, just a name and a why. It's like, hey.
Okay,
I mean, to be honest, I don't know if it has to be rigorous. It's just like, there's an affinity. They filled out the application. It looked good. And everybody's not going to win, you know?
yeah. One of your six was not the person that didn't meet the, okay, all right, so, great, so 12. So you have 12 to choose from. Okay, great. Okay, so I guess the next steps are, we will come together and figure out our
Without-
six.
Without arm wrestling.
We won't arm wrestle.
Okay, good. Because I know that's a battle I won't win.
Okay, we'll figure out our six, and then we will,
Maybe thumb wrestle.
okay. You've seen my thumbs, right? There. All right, so we will do that. We'll come together, we'll figure out our six, and then
We'll put this on the agenda.
we'll bring it to the next P3
Does that give us
committee.
enough time?
I'm sorry?
Timing wise, it's a month out now, and then it'll be a month for the next.
Yeah,
So
or-
now we're 45 days out, right? After we meet and then a board meet.
Yeah.
Well, it could come up at the next board meeting, which, you know, will be,
Yes. So our next committee meeting is July 11th.
But we just mentioned we won't present the winners until the next P3 meeting.
right, that's when we'll present our recommendations.
That's what I'm saying. So if we do that,
And then the next board meeting,
so that's 45 days out now. 'cause our meeting-
So July 11th is the next P3 committee meeting, and the next board meeting after that is July 20th.
oh, I see what you're saying, the
Yeah.
45, okay, all right.
Yeah.
Even more so, yeah. 'Cause so the end of July, some of these kids need this money by 1st of August. Is that going to give them enough time? And we're okay with that?
It is what it is. I think at that point.
Unless we meet
that's the
earlier, I mean, there's
soonest.
no, I don't know. There's no reason to, do we need to present it to this committee before? Or can we just make the decision, present it to the board in the next board meeting?
It's just a recommendation, so if you guys, we could probably, I think what I'm hearing you saying is let's skip taking it back to this
Yes.
committee, and if the two of you
Take
can
it straight to the
agree,
board.
And that way we could do it the first meeting in, or maybe even the second meeting in June?
The next,
It's-
The next board meeting?
Yeah.
we probably wouldn't make the June 15th meeting, but we could make the July 6th meeting.
Okay,
No.
I'm okay with that. That's earlier.
Yeah.
That gives a little bit more of a.
Now, keep
more
in
of a-
mind, we
of
have
a-
to, the July 6th board packet goes out the Thursday before July 6th, so we need it by like the end of June. we'll need to hear back from the
This
two
will
of
take
you.
us 5 minutes. We'll take care of this
It's-
maybe after this meeting.
It's not going to take 5 minutes. I'm going to read them more thoroughly.
If you
than
agree
that.
with him, it just takes 5 minutes, right?
I don't want
Well,
to say
and
it.
if I can just chime in, I sort of noticed some parameters under what Director Pennock chose, and that might be helpful, and I can just share that.
Yeah, did
with
I,
you
yeah,
both
let
in
me
an
know what I,
email.
yeah,
I-
Sometimes I
certain,
do things
certain things popped out, so,
yeah.
Okay,
Those-
certain patterns, you mean, patterns of?
yes, certain patterns popped out.
Okay,
Share 'em, yeah,
You want me to say it right now?
yeah, why not?
I think the Palomar students, I think the water studies students, one of the students was from Mission Hills High and only one submittal from there. And that was one of the ones we want to give a scholarship to was Mission Hills High, so those were some of the things that surfaced.
okay. Well, I think we've got a plan. Are you comfortable with it? Okay, great.
100%.
Okay. It's so exciting. I hope that we can award these scholarships and we can get everybody in at the board meeting and make a big deal of it. I mean, this is going to help a lot of folks, so it's exciting.
Yeah, and I think this was a learning experience for us. This is the first time we've done this, so,
Sure.
and what I heard from the board is they're probably interested in doing this subsequently. So I think we put money in the budget for
I
next
think
year
we
too.
did.
Yeah,
I
we
think
did.
I
We
specifically
probably-
asked about it.
We've probably learned a little bit. We can be a little bit more streamlined, maybe get on it earlier, so for the following year. And a person's eligibility or ineligibility or success or non-success this year doesn't mean they will or won't get it next year.
That's right. I think
Right.
that we've had that conversation, and we
Right.
wanted to make sure
Yep.
that, a one-time application that was not approved does not exclude from
Preclude you, yeah.
subsequent. I
Okay.
mean, especially, when we're awarding to someone that's going to attend Palomar College, they've got such a great program there. So we want to make sure that we have opportunities. Okay, great. Anything else on that?
Sounds good.
Okay, I guess we'll be having some coffee
All right,
or lunch
we'll
or
do it.
something, and
We
we'll
could do that.
we'll knock it out. Okay. Great, okay. Moving on, policy, old business, review of ordinance 204, backflow device upgrades.
Elizabeth and Jason have been waiting so patiently.
Thank
so
you for waiting.
This is
Now
the
we're
star
not
of the
moving.
show today. So I'm not
Thank you,
sure
Chris.
who's going to kick it off. Elizabeth, are you,
I can kick it off.
all right?
I think
it away.
going after scholarships is a tough act, though.
Yes.
That was fun, though.
It's so exciting.
I feel like an American Idol.
Oh,
you know,
no,
where
the
some
wrong one.
comparing notes
Oh,
and
yeah.
You're choosing, it's like,
Yeah.
no, we don't want that.
You both have met Elizabeth, right?
Yes.
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 Not in person.
We really haven't, huh?
No.
Well,
it's been
at
all
the
virtual.
photo, at the solar
photo.
panels.
Yes.
Very
Oh, this
briefly.
is right, yes.
Very briefly.
Yes, good memory.
That was like your first month?
That was my first month
Yeah.
or two here.
I think you had just started. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Elizabeth took over Rob Scholl's position when Rob left as the Development Services Supervisor. Is that the title?
Senior engineer, yes.
Yes.
He has big shoes to fill,
Yeah.
literally, figuratively. Good morning, committee. We're here today to talk about our cross-connection policy, specifically as they relate to backflows. As a refresher of why backflows are required, they are required by state, county public health, and the district to protect the public water system from being contaminated by a private water system, such as a fire sprinkler system. Backflows are required at various locations. Some examples: irrigation meters, commercial properties, multifamily dwelling units, industrial properties, and fire protection systems. For the purpose of today's discussion, we're focusing on fire protection system backflows because those are the backflows that are not compliant within our district. The issue with these backflows, some of the older ones, which are we call single check backflows, they cannot be tested. They're not testable. We have an annual certification process for backflows where a contractor tests it, certifies it, submits the documentation to the district that it's functioning properly. With these older single check backflows, they cannot be tested, so we don't know if they're functioning properly. The older single check backflows, over the last 4 years, they've been failing maybe one per year on average. So they are getting older, they're aging, and they're starting to fail. It's a concern because the older backflows can contain lead. That can not good for public water or public health. And the whole purpose of the backflow is so that water, only flows one direction from the public main in through the backflow to the building and into the fire sprinkler system. We don't want that water coming backward into the district's main. So last time at P3 committee, we said we'd take a deeper dive into our policies and our history and our inventory and come back with an update, which is the purpose of what we're here for today. Thank you. So taking a look at our backflow history of district ordinances, state requirements, and our standard drawings, our first cross-connection ordinance, which covered backflows for fire protection systems, was Ordinance 49, and it was adopted in July of 1970. This ordinance specifically required a double check valve device, which is different than the single check valve devices I talked about on the previous slide. This ordinance also clarified that the customer was responsible to maintain, repair, and replace any device if it is found defective.
So before you go on, did you do all this yourself? I mean, did you put this together?
My staff and I, it's not just
I mean,
me.
this is impressive. Okay, sorry.
We've been doing a lot of reading lately.
That's what I was wondering. You've done, I mean, this is your research, your staff's research.
It is our research,
Wow,
yeah.
Thank you.
It's been a history lesson for us.
That's
It's
what
fun.
I was wondering.
A month later, in August of 1970, the district adopted a standard drawing showing the design for a detector check. The standard drawing showed a single check, so it was not consistent with the ordinance adopted a month prior. In December of 1986, Ordinance 71 was another cross-connection ordinance adopted. It rescinded the original Ordinance 49. It was more specific that it required a double check valve or a reduced pressure detector assembly, which is basically just a more stringent backflow. This language was consistent with Ordinance 49, and it stated that customers are also responsible to maintain, install, or repair the device if they are found defective. Title 17 was updated in June of 1987. It specified double detector check assemblies for fire protection systems. So that was consistent with an ordinance that we had adopted all the way back in 1970. In 1989, the Department of Health Services updated their cross-connection manual, and it also adopted double detector check assemblies for fire protection systems. In 2004, the district revised its standard drawing, and it updated it to show double detector checks and to specify them specifically. In April of 2017, Ordinance 2004 was adopted. This is the current cross-connection ordinance policy. It rescinded Ordinance 71 from 1986. It specified that single check assemblies are not approved for use. It still required either double detector check assemblies or reduced pressure detector check assemblies. And it added language that any existing non-conforming fire detector check assembly for fire detector services must be replaced at the sole expense of the owner and/or the water user. So the obvious question I'm sure everybody probably has is, why do we have single checks, so many single checks, if since 1970 our ordinances and our policy's been pretty clear that double detector checks or testable devices were required to be installed? I think the answer to that is we don't really know. Staff that was here during those years are no longer working here, so we could only speculate. So we sent this history of these ordinances and our standard drawing updates to our attorney, to BBK, to get their input. Their opinion is that any single checks installed since Ordinance 49 in 1970 are likely not the district's responsibility to replace. It's the customer's. Even though the standard drawing was conflicting, they believe ordinances would take precedence over that. So if we use Ordinance 49 as the timeline for determining whether the district is responsible to replace and upgrade it, a detector check, or the customer is, we have about 500 total in our inventory, and 202 of them are single checks. So 14 of them were installed before 1970. We believe those 14 are the district's responsibility to upgrade and replace. 188 were installed after Ordinance 49, so we believe those to be the customer's responsibility to replace. So currently, detector checks are being upgraded in our districts through the tenant improvement review process. This is a process the district implemented in 2018. So any business owner doing a TI, tenant improvement, of their business, whether it's a renovation or a new business moving into and leasing a suite, they submit an application to the district. We review for several things, one of them being whether that property has a detector check and whether or not it is compliant. If it is not compliant, we request that that customer upgrade it at that time. This is only for commercial properties and commercial businesses, this process. And it can be a financial burden for a business going through a building permit process through the city, having to submit a TI review with us because it might not be something they're expecting or anticipating or budgeted for. The average cost for the tenant to upgrade from a single to double detector check varies. Easier assemblies that are existing above ground to just replace it with a new assembly might cost $10,000, but the assemblies that are in vaults, like the photo shown here, can be quite more labor intensive, so they generally can cost more, maybe upwards of up to $45,000.
Are the ones that are in vaults, when they are replaced in the vault, or is it just removed, filled, and then placed above ground?
Above ground,
Okay.
yeah, that's our current standard. Good question. So the customers that we're working with through the TIA process, we have a handful that have requested more time to upgrade their detector check, and generally we have been working with them, ask them what is a reasonable time frame for them, and most of them say within a year. So we follow up with them, and then we are getting them replaced even as we give them more time. So looking at our inventory of how many we have that are single checks, utilizing just the TI process to get these replaced, it would take approximately 20 years to get all of these upgraded. And not all of the single checks on our inventory are for commercial use. Some of them are residential. That means there's potentially more failures that will likely happen as we just depend on the TI process to get these upgraded. As the devices are aging, I anticipate more likely to continue to fail. And that's a concern because we have public health standards that we have to meet to prevent contamination. So staff's recommendation is to implement a process to replace the 14 fire service detector checks that we believe, that staff and BBK believes are the district's responsibility to replace. We would recommend start budgeting for them and replacing those devices in fiscal year 23-24. And then implementing a process to start notifying customers about these non-compliant backflow devices and provide them time to replace and upgrade them. It will probably, take some public outreach to start educating them on that and reaching out to them. So there's likely to be some concern from customers about what that process looks like. And I think maybe, Glenn, you might want to talk more about what that might look
Yeah,
like.
I guess a couple things. One, you'll notice on the second recommendation, this isn't limiting it just to those that we think will go through the TI process. This is finding out of all the remaining single detector checks. Let's have a proactive process to go out there and start putting these people on notice. My experience since I've been here, when we've tried to do these things, they get caught up in, I'll say, the quasi-political realm. So staff will notify, will reach out to a particular person, and that person will either elevate it to the GM level or to board members level, say, hey, this is a huge financial burden. And it is. We understand that it is. So we may have to try to find creative ways to help with the financial burden aspect. But I bring that up because I want to let the committee know that if we're going to embark on this process, we need to make sure that we have, I'll call it the political and managerial courage to follow through on it. Otherwise, every time we send out the letter, if we backtrack, then we're not going to get anybody to comply, because then the word will get around quick, oh, just complain, and they won't make you do it. So this is one of those things that there was a position we had proposed for a budget a while ago to help us kind of an accounts analyst to help track these things and move forward. It's only valuable to have that, a position or a person if you have a process that's gonna be supported. So I guess that's what I'd be looking to the committee for, to say, is this something we can stand behind? And when we go to the board, I'll make a similar statement that if you want staff to embark on this process, that's great, we're supportive of it, but your phones are gonna ring. You're gonna get those phone calls from people that say, hey, $40,000, I just don't have that kind of money. So if the committee or the board is interested in finding ways that we can help them, either financially, technically, or some other way, or through schedules, we're happy to do that as well. Right now, we're looking for kind of support to move forward on this process, because the rate of failure may not sound much. I think Elizabeth said maybe 1 per year. That doesn't sound like a lot, but each one has the potential to contaminate the public water system. Not through the whole service area, but in discrete areas. And that's obviously one of our jobs, is to try to prevent that. So I just want to point out that this will get political and challenging very quickly. So having a good process going out the gate is important, and having understanding with the customers that some are going to need help. And maybe I can ask Director Pennick to remind us of the insurance link with this. You've told me the phrase, and I forget what it's called, but some property owners or businesses may have insurance that will help them with this type of work. So Director Pennick, can you remind me what that was, what
Yeah, I'm just
provision
trying
it
to
was
think of it
called?
myself. Called, well, building code upgrades, but also it's under the assessment, loss assessment coverage.
Loss, yeah.
Yeah, so they can. The problem with that, it has to be an insurable loss. So I like how we're doing a proactive approach, and I agree with it. You've got 188 of them that we need to replace. So just so I understand, I'm a property, it's just a little scenario. I'm a property owner. I own I don't know, 4 commercial units over in San Marcos. I've got a single detector. I need to do the upgrade. I'm not planning any TIs soon. I get a notice from Vallecitos saying, hey, you've got to replace this. With that information, you've got to replace this within 12 months. There's a permit process. So what do I do with that letter next? I mean, what would I do with that letter as a property owner now?
Yeah, so
Do I contact my own plumber, my own backhoe guy, and my own, come here, get my permit, pay the 50 grand and get it done? Or what, tell me, what's my process?
Yeah, so that process would look like, probably we would provide our contact information in that letter to contact our staff. And we would share with you what you need to upgrade it to. We would refer you to our standard drawing, shows the double detector check. And yes, it would be the property owner coordinating with the properly licensed contractor to install that device.
Okay, so that's on him to contract a local
Yes.
contractor to come out and install. We don't do the inspection. Is there a permit that I need to get?
So Vallecitos will do the inspection. They'll be there when the contractor's installing it or shortly thereafter, just to make sure it's installed in accordance with our standards.
Okay, and do I have to get a permit? do
No, I mean, it's just through us. It's on private property.
So
I
there's no
don't.
permitting fee for me to do that? Okay.
Well,
Okay.
so currently, we have a TI review fee, and then we have an inspection deposit for our inspection staff time to inspect it. But moving forward with the program, those might be things we need to consider, whether we would want to charge inspection staff time for that. You know, these types of details we haven't quite worked out
So
yet.
that's where I'm just trying to think, as me as a property owner, I would appreciate that, saying there would be some incentives. There is usually some permit fees that we can waive. Here's a list of contractors that we recommend. Or, I don't know how labor intensive it is, maybe we can provide, do we install these ourselves?
No.
We couldn't install them, as far as just, we don't have the manpower, or we don't have the know-how, whatever.
We wouldn't have the manpower to do this big of a program.
Okay, right, even over a period.
So there's 14 that we're responsible for. Our crews may do those. We may contract those out. I don't know yet, but that's 14.
Gotcha.
To take that up to 200, we wouldn't be able
Yeah,
to do
and
that.
I understand that giving a list of recommended contractors, because that could blow up, and that could be liability issues. Here's a list, here's a list of providers for us to get a better rate. Maybe we can contract with pipe supply companies, or we already have, I'm sure, but to get a better rate on the actual materials and have them find their own, say, hey, we can find the materials at you at a discounted rate.
Yeah, let me-
Find your own contractor. But I'm just trying to think, me as a homeowner, I would have, as a commercial owner, asked to do this, to comply. kind of a little incentive, saying we're gonna waive certain fees, we've got some discounted rates because you're one of multiple, and something like that would incentivize me to actually proceed instead of, hey, you're not compliant, you gotta replace this and it's gonna cost you 30 grand and there's no concessions.
Yeah, I like the concept of waiving fees, whether it's inspection or permitting, those are great. One of the problems when we start helping them out in other ways, like any kind of financial help, it then becomes a prevailing wage job. So when we do a job, we have to pay prevailing wages to contractors, right? And that's usually significantly higher than the plumber charges you.
Good point.
So if these people want us to help them, even if it's to provide a loan, it may trigger prevailing wage, which may
Really?
it may double the cost of the job.
So if we incentivize them in any way, then it goes to prevailing rates.
No, I wouldn't say in any way. So waiving like inspection fees, permit fees, that probably wouldn't trigger anything. But if we, for example, if we said, hey, we'll lend you the money and you pay us back over a year, that would probably trigger prevailing
I wouldn't
wage.
recommend that at all. Yeah, I
So,
understand
and
that.
we would certainly have to check with the attorneys to say, where are the triggers, where are the
Well, that turns a
landmines?
$12,000 job into $25,000 anyways.
Well, exactly.
Based on the prevailing wage.
Yeah.
So yeah, I wouldn't do the loan thing at all, but I would, whatever type of, because these guys, they can pay it, they don't want to pay it. I wouldn't want to pay it, but if I have some type of incentive like, hey, I'm gonna get it, how much are those fees anyways? Are they minor anyways?
So I believe the TI is, fee is $190,
Okay.
and then it's a $2,000 inspection deposit, and our inspection staff charges their time for being on site, overseeing the inspection.
Oh, that
If
could
the
be
money doesn't
substantial.
all get spent, it gets returned to the customer.
Oh, so that's just a return, okay, refundable deposit on
Yeah,
the inspection fee?
Yeah, it's just a deposit account, so it's not a fee that we charge, it's based on the amount of work. If we have a compliant person that schedules everything up, there's a refund. If there's a difficult contractor or a difficult owner that doesn't schedule things, then it usually goes over. You never know, depending on.
Oh, okay,
the
no,
person.
that makes perfect sense, okay, I get that. I'm just trying to put this in like, as just Joe property owner lingo. It needs to be done, I agree, I like the proactive approach, yeah, I appreciate you trying to get a heads up on the political side of it, and that's what I'm trying to do as well, so I understand it when somebody, any type of incentive without getting into prevailing wages, I would recommend, like you said, having some type of list of, affordable contractors, maybe we can work with certain ones that'll bring them down for this type of work, any type of, discount that we can give them on just materials, we have, relationships with suppliers, and then we can almost put that out, hey, if you use these guys and you do it within the year, I'm sure you have a CS savings of $190 on the fee, we'll waive this, and that, and, at least you'll save a couple grand. Let's get it done. That would incentivize me as a property owner to then proceed and do it, because I can see that. And also almost laying this out, hey, this is for, people appreciate, landowners appreciate, hey, we don't want to have a problem with the drinking water here, and by you having this single detector system, you're jeopardizing the rest of us. So, I don't know, laying a little bit of the little history lesson is great. So, no, I appreciate truly what you've done. That was a great history lesson, and I know a lot of time and effort's been put into this. So, I understand it now a lot better, but I don't know how to proceed, try and get 188 of them done in less than 5 years, to be honest, but give it a good shot.
One thing I would add, that if and when we initiate the outreach, there always has to be the or else piece, which is always the touchy part, right? Most of the times you reach out, tell somebody they have an obligation, you'll give them a period of time, they'll reach out and say, hey, can you make it 2 years, not a year? And we'll work with them, we'll get there. Some people will say, I'm never gonna do it, and a lot of people won't even respond. So we always have to figure out what is our recourse to do it if somebody's non-compliant. And I always like to think about that before we initiate the program, instead of having to figure out, now what do we do?
Yeah.
And that could include, well, we'll go do the work and we'll bill you, or we'll shut off your water, and then you can't operate your business. So there's things that we have ability to do that we don't like to do, but history and experience tells us that not everybody's gonna respond to the letter, no matter how well it's written.
If a property owner sells with a new buyer, is there some requirements? I mean,
Yeah, it runs with the property. The property being served has a non-compliant device.
okay, and that's all, that's already out there, they know that, real estate agents, things like that, no.
Well,
No,
I wouldn't say that.
no,
Yeah.
I would say real estate
So there's
agents
some that
typically
are
do
slipping
not
through, there's
know.
properties being sold with this same.
Yes.
And
how-
the folks that buy the property that's sold, and it was sold in this condition, those are the people that we're probably going to
That's
hear
what I'm
from.
concerned
Because
about.
they're going to be, why didn't anybody tell me this? Why wasn't, when you buy a house and there's something wrong with the house, it has to be
There's some
disclosed, right?
disclosure issues,
So you know, I appreciate in theory that we're trying to be proactive, but I can also see small business owners, this is going to hit them really hard, and it's going to come out of the blue if they've never heard about this, particularly from the folks that are supposed to be protecting them during the buying process. And I'm really nervous about that. You know, I know that we're going to try to go forward with 14, but I think being proactive and sending out a notice that says you have to fix this, and I love it that we will give them a year. I think that's really important because $45,000 for a small business owner is a lot all of a sudden that they didn't budget for. So yes, we should be giving them time. I like the idea of having incentives because I think people like carrots rather than sticks. We do have to think about the, well, what if I don't do this? Because that's what I was, you know, as I was hearing this, I was like, well, what if they don't? You know, what if they don't? And we do need to have that in place. People going through the TI process, this will be flagged for them, right? We know that this will be flagged. I'm wondering if there's some kind of compromise where, yes, all the folks going through the TI process, this will be flagged. They will know, and they will know that the TI process triggers it, and that that they'll need to make arrangements and go through the process to upgrade. I just don't think that if we try to be proactive with the other folks that are not going through the TI process, that we're going to get an overwhelming response of people rushing to pay $40,000 to upgrade, and I think that it's going to seem like it comes out of the blue, because this is not new. It's, you know, some of these have been in place for a long time, and I think as a property owner, I would be thinking, well, why now? Why now is it so important that I do this when I've had the property for 10 years and no one's ever told me about this? So I think that there's a lot that we have to consider, and I'm trying to think about it from the perspective of the property owners, but we have to protect our water. So I'm leaning toward not necessarily taking an all or nothing proactive approach. I don't know what the middle ground would look like. We know that the TI process will trigger it. I don't know how many of these properties are planning on undergoing a TI process, but at least that's kind of a fail-safe where, you know, it's sort of there's a rationale behind why they all of a sudden right now have to fix this. But for the other folks, I'm thinking that they're going to struggle with, why do I right now have to fix this when it's been this way for possibly decades and no one's told me about it, and now all of a sudden, after COVID, I'm still trying to recover, and now you're asking me to pay $40,000 for something that I don't even know about. I'm not debating whether or not it's necessary. I'm just trying to figure out, maybe there's some wiggle room in the timeline for the folks that aren't undergoing the TI process, and I think we do need to have some incentives. We need to make it as easy as possible for them, because if I'm a small business owner and I'm trying to recover after COVID, the last thing I want is to try to figure out who can do this work and can it pass inspection. Because if we leave it to everybody else, you know, to figure out who can do this work, and you know, some people are paying $10,000 and some people are paying $30,000, and it's the same work and the quality is not the same. The people that are paying the $10,000 for this, and we come out and inspect and it doesn't pass inspection, you know, that's also going to leave a bad taste in their mouths. So making it as easy as possible for people to actually do this, I think is going to be important.
Yeah, I think that's another area we could add value, and I'm just brainstorming here, haven't had a chance to talk to the team, but we could send out the letters and host a workshop, invite the people to come in, and if nothing else, they get to know each other, and maybe they can collectively seek a contractor to do, and maybe get a better price to do 10 of them instead of just 10 people doing one of them. We maybe try to connect them with contractors. We're not promoting any particular contractor, but here's ones that have this type of the right licensing in this area, that type of thing. Because otherwise they're individual people, they don't know how to work on a broader scale, but keep us out of it from a financial perspective without having to trigger prevailing wages. So in addition to waiving permit inspection and fees and that.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all, the insurance side, I was thinking, I mean, there is something called loss assessment coverage, but there has to be an insurable loss. So the problem with that is just, we have to replace this Things that are excluded insurance are deferred maintenance, wear and tear, so those would be excluded. But if there was a fire or a vandalism, those are the two vandalism to that unit above ground or underground, or a fire that caused damage to it, then that would be an insurable loss. And usually what happens is the property owner has to replace it, but then he's gonna defer those costs to his tenants. That's what usually happens. So the tenants would then get a bill, say, hey, I had to replace this item, it cost me $10,000, there's 4 of us, you guys are all being assessed $2,500. Those tenants then could go to their insurance company and have loss assessment coverage where they would get that $2,500 to pay the deductible and or the damage caused by an insurable loss. So by just getting a letter stating you have to replace this, probably not insurable or insurance, but if there was, wind, rain, hail, smoke, some type of insurable loss, yes. So, yeah.
Elizabeth, can you turn back to your history page? I just want to give a little context to that history. Director, yes, kind of like why now? Well, actually back in 2017, probably a little bit before that, the state, to meet the state regulation laws, said, hey, there's no grandfathering in. They took away the grandfathering in, and that's why, because the only ordinance I was part of was this April 2017 ordinance 204, and that's why that additional language on the non-conforming ones came into play, because before, there was this grandfathering clause, and they took that away. I'm sure they had reasons for taking that away. And then still nothing happened for almost all the agencies. So now the state's saying, you need to start moving forward. And
I
yet,
think that's important to include in the rationale to try to establish why all of a sudden we're sending out these letters.
Yeah,
I think
because
that's really important.
Exactly, because before you were they didn't truly call it a grandfather in, but there was no stated action required, so there was no leverage from the state to the agencies. Then when the state did this, it provided that kind of a march forward, but they still didn't enforce it, and now what the state has said is, every agency, you need to start moving forward. And I just came back from my leadership conference, and we got into a side discussion because several of the agencies are dealing with the same thing, because the state's saying, if you don't move forward, there's going to be a stick. There's going to be a punishment for your agency sooner or later.
I've got two things to say. One about this. Is there money available from the state to help?
Not yet, but they're looking into different things for businesses, but there's nothing that's been adopted. I don't know if there will be, but at this point, there isn't.
Okay.
They gotta take it from the dam money. So you brought up other agencies, how are they handling it? Have you learned anything from them?
Everybody's starting the first step, which is similar to what we're recommending, which is starting out with letters to see if you can get any low-hanging fruit, the people who are willing to comply, and then working with them. Some of them are looking at thresholds. So, for example, you have a year, if it's, I don't know what the number is, 20,000 or less, but if it's more than 20 or more than 25,000, then you have additional time. They're looking at, some of them are concerns about waiving any fees because it could be viewed as a gift of public funds. So they're looking at how to reduce costs. Education is part of it that they're looking at, but nobody's really taken ample steps forward. Some agencies have sent out letters, and then that's all they've done. I think, Jason, your old agency did the same thing, right? Sent out letters, and that's about it?
Yeah, they would send out an initial letter, try to get that low-hanging fruit, and then kind of follow up with the non-responders with a second letter, sort of trying to add a little bit more teeth each time to a third letter. And then I think at that point it was kind of like, uh-oh, what do we do? Do we have that political courage to now actually do enforcement, get the attorneys involved, shut their water off? And for that particular agency, they really didn't have that courage.
And very little response to the letters.
Yeah, you get a couple, but when Elizabeth talks about 188, and Glenn, you were talking about brainstorming like a workshop. I think looking at the volume, we were thinking we would kind of send out maybe decade by decade those letters, because if you send out 188 and all of a sudden you get 188 calls coming in, we probably don't have the staff to now tackle this. So we were trying to think of how can we do this in bite size, but maybe there's an initial notification letter, and then maybe that's followed up with a more proactive letter, I don't know, we can think about that.
Well, that makes sense to me. I'm going to assume that the older these controllers are, the more likely they are to leak and fail. And so I think that that's a good systematic approach. I think I like the idea of potentially loaning, and I like the idea of just making it known that prevailing wages would trigger. I mean, that creates local jobs, and as long as everyone's aware of that, we can be satisfied that the people that we pay prevailing wage to complete the project, they're going to do a good job. They're trained to do that, and that it will pass inspection. So I'm in favor of trying all kinds of ways to incentivize and help, because this is going to be a burden for some people. And if we really want them to get this done, and we can impress upon them until we're blue in the face that it's the right thing to do to protect our water, but if they don't have the money, then they don't have the money. So I think we should approach this and not take any incentives or ideas off the table, as long as we're within the compliance of our ordinance, gift of public funds, et cetera. But prevailing wage, you get skilled and trained folks and creates local jobs. So I'm speaking in defense of that as an option on the table.
Just playing quick math, it could be, if all 200 parties took us up on it and we were lending, it'd be about $6 to $8 million that we'd be putting out there to help people upgrade their detector checks. So it's
Yeah, well, not
significant
everyone's
amount.
not everyone's going to do this. Not
Right.
everyone's going to do it at the same time. Not everyone's going to go about it in that way. And some folks they will do it right away.
Right.
So I think keeping all the options on the table is important to try to get this done, because in the end we want it to get done.
And there's no way to trigger upon a sale, these ones that sell, that has to be disclosed somewhere? There's no way to trigger that?
I don't know what the real estate requirements are for sale of commercial property, because most of these are commercial property, if there's a requirement that they all meet current standards. I don't
Clearly
know.
not, or
I
it
don't
would
know how
have
to
been.
put it, can't you put like a contractor's lien on something where it's not a negative thing, but it's just, that'll
Yeah.
trigger something, right? You put a lien on a property.
Yeah,
that
we
when it's
can
sold-
certainly talk with Best and Krieger and see what they think, because that may be another avenue to get these certain segment of this group to get in
Because then
compliance.
it'll show up right under a title report. Wait a minute, there's a lien, you can't sell this property without changing this
Yeah.
backflow device. And I don't know if there's a cost associated with that or a negative connotation with a lien on it, but that's one option because these properties are gonna sell. I mean, people are starting to sell a lot of stuff right now.
I mean,
That's one way to get some of them, I'm guessing.
One of the things, whichever direction we go, is no matter what, it will be a shock to them, even if it's
Yeah.
just an upfront letter, and management and board will get calls from that. And even through the TI process, it's already happened. I mean, board members have gotten calls because of a backflow issue on a TI process, more than once since I've been here. So with that, the important thing to know is, our ordinance and our policies right now, we comply with the state. So there's only so much we can do. We can't change things to go against what the state rules and regulations are, the local county health department regulations. And then what we're forced to do is enforce them. So we're kind of the bad guy.
Yeah, it's a really tough spot, and we have to get it done. But I think we can probably figure out a way to at least move the bulk of people along with carrots. And I'm really glad you're thinking about it creatively, because yes, we will get calls. We will.
Just put Director Boyd Hodgson's personal number on the bottom of that letter. We'll be all right. She's the dedicated, double-check backflow device expert.
I'm not sure that I'm willing to go knock on doors for this one, like I did for the ag rate. I did. I walked a lot.
Well, I think with this, we were looking for the committee's support, and then we can kind of take it back and develop how we're gonna implement it and run that up the chain.
I mean, it sounds like you've got our support in a variety of ways, yeah,
Yeah.
direct, yeah, just any and all, because that's how you're gonna hit so many different personalities out there. Some are gonna respond to a carrot, some are gonna respond to a fee, some are gonna respond to a waiving of a fee. So yes, I mean, I think you have our support, speaking on behalf.
Agreed.
But in
Yeah.
all, not under just one lane. I think we gotta open up the 4 lanes.
Yeah, I think this will help. It'll help broaden our scope on this, and as we take it forward to the board, we can bring in some of these ideas too, and then I assume this is going to be looking for board approval ultimately?
Well, the ordinance is already in place.
Yeah.
It's been approved, so really it's just, we'd like to just enforce
Yeah.
the existing
It already
ordinance.
Oh, okay, okay.
So with
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
we'll kind of develop a plan really to move forward, so we don't need really to bring this back.
Yeah, it doesn't
There is an
mean-
awareness, like you said.
Right,
You're just
yeah.
looking for some teeth to enforce and already.
You want to
And the
know
ordinance.
that we have your backs.
Well, that's helpful, and I should have been clear. What I meant going to the board, it's not to adopt a new ordinance, it's to have the same conversation with the board that we're having with the both of you, because their phone, it's not gonna be just your phones that ring, it's gonna be all their, and I don't want anybody to be blindsided on the board to say, boy, I didn't know we were going through this big program, because then the other three are gonna ask questions, well, what did we do? What options did we consider? So that's what I think, before we send out a letter, I'd like to have the whole board understand what we're doing, and this was helpful to me, so we can expand our presentation and be a little bit more clear on what the initial letter may say, what options are out there, what assistance the board or the district can offer, those types of things. And then make sure everyone's on the same page and say, okay, let's go forth.
Yeah, I think the points that I just want to reiterate are, let's try to find a way to stagger the enforcement, and let's do it in a systematic way based on oldest first. I think, to me, that makes sense. And it also, is the likelihood that those are the ones that are going to fail. I really like, James, what you said about, some agencies are, if there's a cost estimate of over $20,000, that the time is expanded. I mean, I think that's reasonable. It's reasonable to for a 12-month period, but then I think it's also reasonable to extend that a little bit if it's on the upper end of those estimates. And again, having all of the carrots on the table and making it as easy as possible, providing contractors that we know are going to do a good job, loaning the money if we can get around that, and not everyone's going to go for that, and we don't know that it'll double the cost, but with the understanding that paying prevailing wage will increase the cost, but some people, that might be good for them just to, here, take it and do it and be done with it. I think that those are the points that I want to make.
Okay, good, thank you. James, anything else? You guys good?
Yeah, I just want to make the point, because I hear what you're saying, and when we talk about recommending contractors, so we work with a lot of contractors. They're public works contractors. They're used to working in the public right of way. A lot of these commercial property owners, they're going to have a plumber, going to do it a lot cheaper, obviously. So I'm just not sure how we want to recommend people. That may be a conversation that we would kind of take, like maybe we wouldn't put that in the letter, but if they call and say, hey, help us out, we could kind of help them out through that process. I'm not sure I want to put anything in print.
Yeah, understood. I mean, I think that's beyond the scope of our jobs to recommend who, but just having some name,
Yeah, no, we can definitely extend our experience, and, there's lists of state certified people that do this work, so we can kind of point them to that if they want that. And then there's just local folks that we work with, so we could definitely help them.
Right. I mean, I think, to my mind, if I were in this situation, I would want to make sure that it gets done correctly so that I don't have to do it again when you come out and inspect. I wouldn't want to, my first thought would be, well, can I hire my handyman? Can that person do it? And then my next thought would be, well, I don't want to have to hire two people because the first person didn't do it up to code or up to inspection.
Yeah,
Right,
when they
right.
engage with our staff, we'll be able to walk them through that process.
So that, and I get, instead of listing a list, we do have resources available, whether it's supplies and/or contractors. You just give us a call.
Yeah,
That's the
we can,
first step,
yeah,
give us
we
a
can
call.
point them toward those warehouses that those pipe
Right.
suppliers, that.
Because like you're saying, if they're a property owner, they probably do have their own local contractor, most of them.
Most of them do.
Sometimes not, though. I mean, I get a lot of calls, just as an insurance agent. Hey, the guy owns 100 condos. Hey, do you have a guy that can change out my toilet? I'm going, you own 100 condos, you don't have a plumber? Yeah, you can Joe the plumber down here. So some of them don't, but, at least giving that thing, we do have resources available at, I don't know if we can say discounted rates or at reasonable rates or whatever. There's those keywords that will prompt somebody to call in.
Trusted.
Discounted, best rate, whatever, something like that. It's like, somebody reads those things, maybe we need to have a marketer. And there's just a key word in there that'll prompt them to either throw that in the garbage or to, yeah, I better get on this and make the phone call to Vallecitos. So I don't know, some type of, that letter is important. And maybe instead of coming from, you know, boring, I don't know, I don't want to say boring, it's just a standard thing, maybe it has to be almost like a marketing letter. You know, I hate to say it, but.
Maybe Chris shouldn't have left.
Do we have a marketing department? I don't know.
We've got Chris.
We got Chris. You know what I'm saying? Instead of just, you gotta do this, you know, it's a standard, because I get some of those.
We could definitely draft something up and then give it to
Some
Chris's
bells and whistles
department
on it and
to jazz it up for us.
Yeah, because it sounds like it is. It's almost like a marketing plea, for reasonable reasons, but.
At the end of the day, I think that this district staff could offer some resources, and then depending on where the board goes, if there is some type of other incentives, then we could obviously add that into the letter. So this won't be solved right away, because when we have a larger, broader discussion, if there's certain type of, whether it's a loan program or something like that, that does move forward, then we'll have to figure out the details of that to put into the letter.
Thank you. Thanks for all of your work on this. This was a lot of background, and it's not an easy situation that we're in. So thank you.
Thank you.
I think that's all we had.
Okay, did you get what you needed from us then? Okay, great. I think our next meeting date on the agenda is July 11th. Anything else that you would like to add?
So I just thank you to everybody. Good meeting.
Good
That was a
meeting.
good meeting, and thank you to staff, and appreciate it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, everyone. We are adjourned, 11:55.